Hello and welcome to your ultimate guide for the Ohio Real Estate Salesperson exam. My goal today is simple. Give you everything you need to fully understand the key concepts, master them, and walk into your exam with total confidence. In this video we will cover questions from agency law, trust accounts, property ownership, real estate contracts, fair housing. With over 100 plus success stories, we have proven our videos will help you pass your exam on the first attempt. And remember, our website offers free exam guides and practice questions to help you ace your exam. You'll find the link in the description below, so be sure to check it out and get the resources you need to study smarter, not harder. So let's get started.
Question 1. Ohio requires every brokerage to adopt which of the following, stating the agency relationships it offers and its confidentiality procedures for affiliated licensees. Your options are A federal disclosure waiver, B, a standard purchase agreement, C, a written company agency policy, D, a multiple listing membership. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C, a written company agency policy. C is correct because every Ohio brokerage must adopt a written company agency policy stating the types of agency relationships it offers, whether it permits dual agency, and the confidentiality and information barrier procedures for affiliated licensees. A is wrong because a federal disclosure waiver is not an Ohio brokerage requirement for agency relationships. The required document is the brokerage's own written agency policy. B is wrong because a standard purchase agreement governs a single sales terms. It does not set out the brokerage's menu of agency relationships or its confidentiality procedures. D is wrong because multiple listing membership is a marketing affiliation, not a statutory policy. Joining an MLS does not satisfy the requirement to adopt a written agency policy. Every Ohio real estate brokerage must adopt a written company agency policy. TISATIT 18, the firm's own internal rule book for handling representation. This document is set at the company level before any deals are made, and it binds every licensee affiliated with the firm. The policy spells out 4 core things: which agency relationships the firm offers, whether it permits dual agency, whether it allows designated agency, and the confidentiality procedures that protect clients on both sides of a transaction. When one licensee represents the seller and another represents the buyer inside the same firm, confidential information must be kept separate. The company policy defines the information barrier that prevents each side from accessing the other's sensitive details. 3 common lookalikes trip up exam takers. A purchase agreement governs one sale's terms. An agency disclosure form is signed per transaction. MLS membership is a marketing affiliation. Only the written company agency policy sets the firm's representation rules for every deal in advance. Remember, the written company agency policy is not a government form, not a trade association card, and not a per deal document. It is the single standing company commitment that Ohio can examine any time a complaint or audit arrives. Question 2. 2 licensors in one brokerage represent opposite sides of a sale, separated by an information barrier while a management broker stays neutral. Which of the following is this? Your options are A, designated agency, B, open listing, C, subagencia, D, no agency relationship. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A, designated agency. A is correct because designated agency lets 2 affiliated licensees fully represent opposite parties using an information barrier. The management level broker serves as the neutral dual agent at the brokerage level, authorized by the company's written agency policy. B is wrong because an open listing is a compensation structure where a seller may use several brokerages and pays only the one who sells. It describes a listing type, not an in-house representation arrangement. C is wrong because subagency means a cooperating licensee represents the seller, not the buyer. It does not involve two same brokerage licensees split by a firewall serving opposite clients. D is wrong because a no-agency relationship means the licensee represents no one as a client. The scenario has both parties fully represented, which is the opposite of working without representation. Designated agency is a structure that allows one Ohio brokerage to fully represent both a seller and a buyer in the same transaction, without either client losing out on dedicated advocacy. The broker assigns one licensee to represent the seller and a separate licensee to represent the buyer. A strict information barrier sits between them. What each client shares in confidence stays only with their own agent. Above both designated agents sits the management level broker, who serves as a neutral dual agent for the firm as a whole. This role is authorized in advance by the brokerage's written company agency policy, and the broker supervises both sides without tipping the balance toward either client. The critical distinction examiner's test is this. In plain dual agency, one licensee represents both parties and can fully advocate for neither, becoming a neutral conduit. In designated agency, each client keeps a fully committed advocate. Only the brokerage entity itself occupies the dual role. Picture it as a simple structure. The brokerage sits at the top, the neutral management broker just below, and two separate designated agents branching off on either side, each connected only to their own client, with a firewall keeping confidential information from crossing between them. Question 3. Buyer and seller dispute who is owed the earnest money the broker holds. Absent joint written instructions or a court order, what should the broker do with the funds? Your options are A. Release them to the seller. B. Release them to the buyer. C. Continue holding them. D. Split them evenly. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is C. Continue holding them. C is correct because when earnest money is disputed, the broker must keep it in the trust account. Ohio law permits disbursement only on the transaction closing, joint written instructions from both parties, or a court order. A is wrong because a broker may not disperse disputed earnest money on one side's demand. Releasing it to the seller without joint instructions or a court order would violate the broker's duty to hold it. B is wrong because handing the funds to the buyer is equally improper during a dispute. The broker cannot favor either party's unilateral claim and must wait for proper authority to release the money. D is wrong because splitting the deposit is not an authorized resolution. The broker has no power to decide the dispute and must hold the full amount until the parties agree or a court directs payment. When a buyer and seller both claim earnest money, the broker's legal duty is clear. Hold the funds and wait. The broker is a neutral custodian, not a judge, and has no authority to decide who wins a dispute. Ohio law permits the broker to release disputed earnest money only in 3 situations: a clean closing, joint written instructions signed by both parties, or a court order. Until one of these 3 triggers exists, the money stays in the trust account. No exceptions. The broker sits squarely in the middle, holding the deposit while both sides press their claims. None of the pressure from either party constitutes legal authority to release. The money moves only when a proper trigger arises from outside the dispute. Paying the seller, paying the buyer, splitting the deposit evenly, or acting on any one-sided demand are all violations. Each choice has the broker deciding a legal question. Only the parties or a court may resolve, and could mean handing money to the wrong person entirely. When no joint instructions and no court order exist, the broker simply keeps holding. Patience and neutrality protect the broker, the funds, and both parties until proper authority resolves the dispute. Question 4. Which of the following sets lists the 4 characteristics a property must possess to have value in the market? Your options are A. Demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. B. Location, size, age, condition. C. Land, labor, capital, profit. D. Possession, control, enjoyment, disposition. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. Demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. A is correct because for a property to have market value, it must have demand backed by purchasing power, utility, scarcity, and transferability. These 4 traits are remembered by the acronym DUST. B is wrong because location, size, age, and condition are physical features compared during appraisal adjustments. They describe a property's characteristics, not the 4 economic ingredients required for value to exist. C is wrong because land, labor, capital, and profit are the classic factors of production in economics. They explain how goods are produced, not the qualities a property needs to hold market value. D is wrong because possession, control, enjoyment, and disposition are sticks in the bundle of ownership rights. They define what an owner may do, not the elements that give a property value. For a property to have market value, 4 economic conditions must all be present simultaneously. Appraisers remember them with a single acronym, DUST. Demand means buyers both want and can afford the property, while economists call this effective demand. Utility means the property serves some useful purpose. Scarcity means supply is limited relative to demand. And transferability means ownership can actually be conveyed with clear title. Imagine a remote Ohio farm parcel that can be farmed and is genuinely scarce. 2 conditions met. But if no buyer wants it, demand is missing. Add a clouded title and transferability fails too. Market value requires all 4, not just a partial set. Examiners test whether you can separate dust from 3 look-alike lists. The factors of production explain how goods are made. Physical characteristics describe a building for appraisal adjustments. And the bundle of rights describes what an owner may do. None of these explain why a property has value. When any one of the 4 dust ingredients is missing, market value cannot exist no matter how attractive the property appears. Dust alone answers what makes real estate worth owning in the first place. Question 5. Which of the following best describes the type of property covered by Ohio's commercial real estate broker lien law for unpaid commissions? Your options are A. Only residential 1 to 4 unit homes. B. Any property, residential or commercial. C. Only commercial property, not residential 1 to 4 units. D. Only vacant agricultural land. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. Only commercial property, not residential 1 to 4 units. C is correct because Ohio's Commercial Broker Lien Act lets a broker place a lien on commercial real estate to secure a commission earned under a written agreement. It applies only to commercial property, not to residential 1 to 4 unit property. I is wrong because the law excludes residential 1 to 4 unit property rather than covering it. For unpaid residential commissions, the broker must sue in court. No lien remedy exists there. B is wrong because the lien is not available for any property type. It is limited to commercial real estate, leaving residential 1 to 4 unit homes outside its reach. D is wrong because the Act is defined by commercial use, not by vacant agricultural status specifically. Commercial property broadly qualifies, while residential 1 to 4 units do not. Ohio law gives commercial real estate brokers a powerful collection tool. the right to place a lien on a property to secure an unpaid commission. This remedy changed the game for brokers handling large deals. When a broker has a signed commission agreement and the owner refuses to pay after performance, the broker records a lien directly against the commercial real estate. That lien clouds the title, follows the property into any sale or refinance, and forces the unpaid commission to be settled before clear title can pass. The law applies exclusively to commercial real estate. It expressly excludes residential property of 1 to 4 units. Ordinary homes and small rentals are outside the lien remedy's reach entirely. The dividing line is commercial use versus residential 1 to 4 unit property, not whether land is vacant or agricultural. A broker owed money on a duplex must still file a lawsuit. There is no lien option. Vacant or agricultural land is simply a distractor. Lock in this rule. Ohio's commercial broker lien applies to commercial real estate and stops there. Residential 1 to 4 unit properties are excluded, and the only remedy for those is a breach of contract suit in court. Question 6. After the recovery fund pays a claim on a licensee's behalf, which of the following happens to that licensee's license? Your options are: A. Suspended until the fund is repaid. B. It is permanently revoked at once. C. It continues with no further consequence. D. It converts automatically to inactive status. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Suspended until the fund is repaid. A is correct because when the fund pays, the licensee's license is automatically suspended with no separate hearing needed. The suspension stays in place until the licensee repays the fund the full amount paid, plus interest at the statutory rate. B is wrong because payment triggers a suspension, not permanent revocation. The licensee can restore the license by repaying the fund with interest, an option that outright revocation would foreclose. C is wrong because a fund payment always carries consequences for the licensee. Allowing the license to continue untouched would defeat the repayment incentive the suspension is designed to create. D is wrong because inactive status is a voluntary non-disciplinary condition a licensee elects. A recovery fund payment forces a suspension tied to repayment, which is a different mechanism altogether. The Ohio Real Estate Recovery Fund protects consumers harmed by licensee misconduct. When a court judgment goes unpaid, the fund steps in, but there are real consequences for the licensee responsible. When the fund pays a consumer's claim, two things happen simultaneously. The consumer is made whole, and the responsible licensee's license is automatically suspended. No separate hearing required. The suspension holds until every dollar plus statutory interest is repaid to the fund. Examiners specifically test what this penalty is not. It is not a permanent revocation which would remove all incentive to repay. It is not a no-consequence event which would destroy the repayment incentive entirely. And it is not voluntary inactive status, which is a personal, non-disciplinary choice. The suspension is automatic and immediate. It operates by law the instant the fund pays out. The licensor cannot practice real estate until the full debt, including statutory interest, is cleared. This mechanism turns a public payout into a powerful, private repayment incentive. Whenever a scenario describes the recovery fund paying a claim, the answer is an automatic suspension, not revocation, not inactivity, not nothing. The suspension lifts only when the licensee repays the fund in full, with interest. Question 7. Which of the following describes the prohibited act of depositing a client's earnest money into the broker's operating account? Your options are: A. Subrogation, B. Steering, C. Novation, D. Commingling. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. Commingling. D is correct because depositing a client's funds into the broker's operating account is commingling, even if the broker intends to track the funds separately by ledger. Physical separation is required because ledger entries alone are insufficient protection. A is wrong because subrogation is the state stepping into a claimant's shoes after the recovery fund pays. It concerns reimbursement rights, not the improper mixing of client funds with operating money. B is wrong because steering is directing buyers toward or away from neighborhoods based on protected traits. That is a fair housing violation, entirely separate from mishandling earnest money. C is wrong because novation is the substitution of a new contract or party for an old one. It belongs to contract law and has nothing to do with how a broker deposits trust funds. Commingling is the prohibited mixing of a client's money with a broker's own business funds. Understanding why this rule exists and exactly where the line falls is essential for both the exam and real practice. Commingling occurs the moment client funds land in the broker's operating account, so the account used for rent, salaries, and bills. Even if a careful ledger tracks every dollar, the client's money is now exposed to the broker's creditors and bank levies. Only physical separation in a genuine trust account provides real protection. Client funds, earnest money, collected rents, and similar deposits must go into a designated trust account and stay there until properly disbursed. The broker's own operating funds belong in a separate account entirely, with a firm legal wall between the two. Commingling is specifically the improper mixing of funds. The money is in the wrong account but has not been spent. Conversion goes further. The broker actually uses client funds for personal purposes. These are two distinct offenses. Subrogation, steering, and novation describe completely different legal concepts and should not be confused with commingling. Remember, a tidy spreadsheet cannot undo commingling. The violation is the mixing itself, the moment client money enters the broker's account. Physical separation in a proper trust account is the only standard that counts. Question 8. Which of the following describes acquiring title to another's land by possessing it openly, continuously, and without permission for the statutory period? Your options are A. Escheat, B. Eminent domain, C. Adverse possession, D. Foreclosure. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is C. Adverse possession. C is correct because adverse possession is an involuntary transfer in which a possessor gains title by occupying land hostilely, openly, continuously, and exclusively for the statutory period. Ohio requires 21 continuous years. A is wrong because escheat is the state's claim to property when an owner dies with no will and no heirs. It involves an ownerless estate, not a trespasser earning title through long possession. B is wrong because eminent domain is the government's power to take property for public use with compensation. It is a paid government taking, not a private party gaining title by occupying land without permission. D is wrong because foreclosure is the forced sale of property to satisfy an unpaid debt. It transfers title through a lender's remedy, not through a possessor's open, continuous occupation over many years. Adverse possession is one of the rare ways title to land can change hands without the owner's consent. It rewards someone who openly occupies and uses another's land over a long period of time. Every element must be satisfied simultaneously. Open and notorious means the use is visible enough to put the owner on notice. Continuous means the clock never resets. Exclusive means the possessor, not the public, controls the land. And hostile means without permission because permission makes the occupant a guest, not an adverse claimant. Imagine a farmer near Chillicothe who builds a fence a few feet onto a neighbor's land and farms that strip openly, year after year, without ever asking permission. After 21 continuous years in Ohio, that farmer can go to court and claim legal title to the strip. The most tested nuances are permission and continuity. A friendly arrangement, any permission from the owner, makes the use permissive rather than hostile, and the claim can never ripen no matter how many years pass. Similarly, a gap in possession breaks the chain and starts the count over from zero. Adverse possession exists because the law favors land that is actively used and occupied over land left idle. When every element is met for the full statutory period, the possessor earns the right to be declared the legal owner. Question 9. After an Ohio agency relationship ends, which of the following duties does the licensee still owe the former client? Your options are A. Continued confidentiality and accounting. B. Ongoing loyalty and advocacy. C. A duty to find replacement representation. D. Continued obedience to instructions. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is A. Continued confidentiality and accounting. A is correct because confidentiality and accounting survive termination. The licensee must keep the former client's confidential information confidential and account for any of the client's money or property still held even after the relationship ends. B is wrong because loyalty and advocacy end when the agency ends. Once the relationship terminates, the licensee no longer champions the former client's interest, unlike the duties that continue. C is wrong because no higher duty obligates an agent to arrange replacement representation. The surviving obligations concern confidentiality and accounting, not finding the client a new agent. D is wrong because obedience requires an active agency to obey. After termination, there are no lawful instructions to follow, so that duty does not carry forward. When an agency relationship ends, most duties the licensee owed simply stop. But two obligations outlast the relationship itself, and understanding which ones and why is essential. Confidentiality and accounting are the two duties that survive. Loyalty, obedience, and advocacy all require an active relationship. Once the agency ends, so do they. The reason these two duties carry forward is that the harm they prevent does not disappear when the relationship closes. A client's secrets and a client's money retain their sensitivity and value regardless of whether the agency is still active. Think of it as a clean split: duties of active championing. Loyalty, obedience, and advocacy depend on a living relationship. Confidentiality and accounting protect things that remain sensitive and valuable long after the representation stops. When a question asks what a licensee still owes a former client, look for confidentiality and accounting. Those two carry forward. Everything else, loyalty, advocacy, obedience, ended the day the agency did. Question 10. Of the four government powers limiting ownership, which of the following is the only one that requires the government to pay the owner? Your options are A. Escheat, B. Taxation, C. Police power, D. Eminent domain. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is D. Eminent domain. D is correct because among police power, eminent domain, taxation, and escheat, only eminent domain requires payment. The government must pay just compensation when it takes private property for a public use. A is wrong because escheat lets the state claim property when an owner dies without heirs or a will. The state takes ownerless property at no cost, so it does not pay compensation. B is wrong because taxation is a charge to fund government, not a purchase of property. The owner pays the government rather than receiving payment, so taxation involves no compensation to the owner. C is wrong because police power regulates use without buying the property. Reasonable regulation requires no payment unless it goes so far as to destroy essentially all economic use of the land. Behind every private land title stand 4 government powers that limit what an owner truly controls. A useful way to remember them is the acronym PEAT: police power, eminent domain, taxation, and escheat. Each of these 4 powers constrains ownership in a different way. 3 of them impose burdens on the owner with no payment at all, but one stands apart by requiring the government to compensate the owner when it acts. Eminent domain is the government's power to take private property for a public use: a road, a school, a utility easement. The Constitution requires that the owner receive just compensation, typically the fair market value of what was taken. This pairing of the taking with payment is what makes eminent domain unique. Police power lets the government regulate land for public health, safety, and welfare. Reasonable regulation requires no payment. Taxation charges the owner to fund government services. Escheat transfers property to the state when no heirs exist. None of these 3 write a check to the owner. When an exam asks which government power requires payment to the owner, the answer is always eminent domain. The other 3, police power, taxation, and escheat, burden ownership freely. In PEAT, only one power writes a check. Question 11. A naturally occurring, colorless, odorless radioactive gas seeps into homes from the soil and is a leading cause of lung cancer. Which hazard is this? Your options are A. Carbon monoxide, B. radon, C. formaldehyde, D. asbestos. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is B. radon. B is correct because radon is a naturally occurring, colorless, odorless radioactive gas from the decay of uranium in soil and rock. It seeps into buildings through foundation cracks and is a leading cause of lung cancer. A is wrong because carbon monoxide is a combustion byproduct from fuel burning appliances, not a gas seeping from soil. It is detectable by an alarm and is not radioactive. C is wrong because formaldehyde is a volatile organic compound off-gas mainly from pressed wood products, such as particle board. It is a manufactured indoor pollutant, not a radioactive gas that rises from the soil. D is wrong because asbestos is a solid mineral fiber used in construction materials, not a gas. Its danger arises when fibers become airborne, not by seeping from the ground. Radon is a naturally occurring radioactive gas produced as uranium in soil and rock decays underground. Because it is colorless, odorless, and tasteless, the only way to detect it is to test for it. The gas seeps up from the ground and enters buildings through foundation cracks, pipe gaps, sump openings, and crawl spaces. Because it collects in enclosed lower levels, basements and ground floors show the highest concentrations. When test readings come back elevated, the standard remedy is subslab depressurization, a pipe and fan system that pulls radon from beneath the slab and vents it safely above the roofline. The problem is manageable once identified. Examiners often test whether you can tell radon apart from similar sounding hazards. Carbon monoxide comes from fuel burning appliances. Formaldehyde off gases from manufactured wood products. Asbestos is a solid fiber, not a gas at all. Radioactive from the soil and odorless always points to radon. A house can look spotless and still have dangerous radon levels simply because of the geology beneath it. Testing is the only way to know, and once identified, the hazard can be fixed. Question 12. Which of the following must a licensee do when a party signs a listing agreement, offer, or other transaction document? Your options are A. Mail a copy within 30 days. B. Keep the only copy at the office. C. File the document with the county. D. Provide a copy at signing. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is D. Provide a copy at signing. D is correct because a licensee must provide a copy of any document to the party signing it at the time of signing. Promising to email a copy later does not satisfy this requirement, and failing to comply is grounds for discipline. A is wrong because the copy is due at signing, not within a later 30-day window. Deferring delivery, even by mail, falls short of the immediate copy the rule requires. B is wrong because keeping the only copy defeats the rule's purpose. The signing party is entitled to their own copy immediately, while the broker also retains records for audit. C is wrong because a listing or offer is not recorded with the county. The obligation is to hand the signing party a copy, not to file the private agreement publicly. Ohio law imposes a simple but strict duty on licensees. Whenever any party signs a transaction document, that person is entitled to a copy immediately. Joaquin same. Not later, not after a follow-up email, but right then at the moment of signing. The rule covers every transaction document, including the listing agreement, any offer to purchase, and any other paperwork the parties sign during a deal. Each signing event triggers its own independent obligation. Without an immediate copy, a signer has no way to confirm the terms, check critical dates, or seek advice while the details are still fresh. Handing over the copy on the spot keeps the consumer on equal footing with the brokerage. 4 common substitutes all fall short. Mailing within 30 days, promising to email it later, keeping the only copy at the office, and filing the document with the county are each irrelevant. None of them replaces placing a copy in the signer's hands at signing. The entire rule turns on one word: immediate. The broker retains its own records for the firm's files, and the consumer walks away holding proof of what they agreed to. Skipping this step is grounds for discipline. Question 13. When a buyer submits an offer in Ohio, the good faith deposit is generally placed with which party for safekeeping until the transaction proceeds? Your options are A. The broker's trust account, B. The seller directly, C. The buyer's attorney's office, D. The county recorder. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is A. The broker's trust account. A is correct because earnest money in Ohio is held in the broker's trust or special account, separate from the broker's own funds. The broker safeguards it until the transaction closes or the parties direct its release. B is wrong because handing the deposit straight to the seller defeats its purpose as protected good faith money. Ohio law keeps it in a neutral trust account so it is not released to either party prematurely. C is wrong because the standard Ohio practice places earnest money in the listing broker's trust account, not the buyer's attorney. The broker is the customary neutral holder of these funds. D is wrong because the county recorder maintains land records and recorded documents. It has no role in holding a buyer's earnest money deposit during a pending transaction. When a buyer makes an offer and puts up a good faith deposit in Ohio, that earnest money doesn't go to the seller or stay with the buyer. It has a very specific protected home. The deposit travels with the accepted offer directly into the listing broker's trust account, sometimes called a special or escrow account. This account is kept entirely separate from the brokerage's own operating funds, and the broker holds the money as a neutral custodian, not as an owner. Ohio examiners test whether you can identify the correct neutral holder. Giving funds to the seller strips away their protected status. Routing to the buyer's attorney is not the Ohio standard. The county recorder handles recorded land documents and has no role in holding earnest money whatsoever. The broker's job is pure custody. The funds are never commingled with the firm's money, and the broker cannot use them. The deposit is disbursed at closing or as the purchase agreement and parties direct. Sa ian naitig. The broker is a stakeholder, not an owner. Whenever a question asks where a buyer's good faith deposit is placed for safekeeping, the answer is the listing broker's trust account, the designated neutral repository that protects the deposit until the transaction resolves. Question 14. An agent must report on and safeguard all client funds and keep them out of the broker's own operating account. Which fiduciary duty does this describe? Your options are A. Care, B. Loyalty, C. Accounting, D. Confidentiality. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is C. Accounting. C is correct because accounting requires the agent to maintain and report on all funds received for the client and to keep those funds in a separate trust account. Mixing them with the broker's operating funds is prohibited commingling. A is wrong because care is the duty to bring competent, diligent skill to the representation. Negligence breaches care, but handling and reporting client money falls under accounting. B is wrong because loyalty requires favoring the client's interest over others. While misusing funds can also offend loyalty, the specific duty to track and segregate money is accounting. D is wrong because confidentiality protects the client's private information from disclosure to others. It addresses safeguarding the client's secrets and negotiating strategy, not the safekeeping, segregation, and reporting of money received. Among the fiduciary duties an agent owes a client, accounting is the one focused entirely on money and property. It goes beyond a vague promise of honesty. It creates a concrete, enforceable obligation. The duty has 3 core requirements. Funds must be held in a designated trust account. Every transaction must be logged, and the agent must be able to show the client exactly what came in, what went out, and what remains. Client funds go into a trust account and never touch the broker's operating money. Mixing the two is called commingling, and using client funds for the broker's own purposes is conversion. Both are violations of the accounting duty, not just bad bookkeeping. Examiners love to test how accounting differs from the other duties. Care is about competent work. Loyalty is about putting the client's interests first. Confidentiality protects private information. Accounting is the one duty aimed specifically at safekeeping and reporting client funds. Whenever a scenario describes an agent's obligation to track, safeguard, and report on client funds, that is the duty of accounting, defined by a separate trust account, accurate records, and full transparency on demand. Question 15. A landowner gives a prospective buyer the right, but not the obligation, to purchase at a fixed price within 6 months in exchange for a fee. Which contract is this? Your options are A. A right of first refusal, B. An option, C. A purchase agreement, D. A net listing. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is B. An option. B is correct because an option gives the optionee the right, but not the obligation, to buy at a fixed price within a set period, paid for with an option fee. Only the optioner is bound to sell. A is wrong because a right of first refusal fixes no price and gives no power to buy at will. It only lets the holder match a third party's offer if the owner later decides to sell. C is wrong because a purchase agreement is a bilateral contract obligating both sides to close. The arrangement described binds only the owner, leaving the buyer free to walk away, which makes it unilateral. D is wrong because a net listing is a way to compensate a broker based on sale proceeds above a set figure. It concerns brokerage pay, not a buyer's right to purchase at a fixed price. An option is a powerful but often misunderstood real estate tool. It gives a buyer the right, but never the obligation, to purchase a property at a fixed price within a set period in exchange for an upfront fee. The optionee holds the right and can choose freely. The optional who grants it is fully bound. The option fee is what makes that obligation enforceable. The owner is compensated whether or not the sale ever closes. Think of an option as a reservation. The buyer locks in a price and takes the property off the market for a set period, giving time to arrange financing, secure permits, or study whether the deal makes sense without committing to buy. This is what separates an option from similar concepts. A purchase agreement is bilateral. Both sides must close. A right of first refusal sets no price and only lets the holder match someone else's offer. Only the option is unilateral, binding the owner alone. Whenever you see a scenario describing the right, but not the obligation, to buy at a fixed price within a set time for a fee, that is an option. The lopsided commitment is the giveaway every time. Question 16. Which of the following correctly describes how real estate commissions are set in Ohio when a broker and a client agree on terms? Your options are A. Fixed by the Ohio Real Estate Commission. B. Set by the local board's schedule. C. Negotiable between the parties. D. Capped by the superintendent annually. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is C. Negotiable between the parties. C is correct because commissions are negotiable and are never set by law, a board, or a multiple listing service. The amount is agreed between the parties, and any attempt to fix rates raises antitrust concerns. A is wrong because the commission adopts conduct rules and the canons of ethics. It does not set commission amounts. Pricing is left to negotiation between the broker and the client. B is wrong because a local board may not dictate a commission schedule. Boards set on rates would invite antitrust liability, so commissions remain a matter of private negotiation. D is wrong because the superintendent enforces the license law and issues licenses, but places no annual cap on commissions. Fees are negotiated, not capped by any state official. In Ohio, real estate commissions are not set by any law, government body, or industry organization. The amount a broker charges is determined entirely by private negotiation between the broker and the client. Four bodies that might seem like candidates: the Ohio Real Estate Commission, local boards, the MLS, and the superintendent govern conduct and licensing, but none of them may set or cap commission amounts. Each commission is the product of a single private negotiation between one broker and one client. Whatever they agree to is written into the listing agreement. No rate card, no schedule, no outside authority involved. The reason is antitrust law. A commission is a price, and when competitors agree to charge the same price, that is illegal price fixing. Keeping every commission a private matter between one broker and one client preserves competition and keeps the industry on the right side of the law. Whenever an exam question asks who sets commission rates, the answer is always the broker and the client together. No commission is handed down by a statute, a board schedule, or a state cap. It comes from private agreement, exactly as the law requires. Question 17. A rental ad states a preference such as adults only or a particular religious group. Which fair housing violation does this advertisement represent? Your options are A. Lawful puffing, B. Permissible screening, C. An antitrust tie-in, D. Discriminatory advertising. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is D. Discriminatory advertising. D is correct because an advertisement may never indicate a preference, limitation, or discrimination based on a protected class. Phrases like adults only or a stated religious preference are prohibited discriminatory advertising, regardless of intent. A is wrong because puffing is harmless exaggeration of a property's appeal, like calling it charming. Expressing a preference against families or a faith group is unlawful, not mere salesmanship. B is wrong because lawful screening applies objective, consistent criteria such as income and credit to every applicant alike. Advertising a protected class preference is discrimination on its face, not a legitimate qualification standard. C is wrong because an antitrust tie-in forces a customer to buy an unwanted product to obtain a desired one. That concept addresses anti-competitive bundling, not the content of biased housing advertisements. Fair housing law doesn't just prohibit turning people away. It also forbids advertising that signals who is unwanted. The violation lives in the words of the ad itself. The harm occurs at the advertising stage, when an ad signals that families with children or members of a certain faith are unwelcome. Those people never apply. That chilling effect is the violation, even if the landlord meant no harm. Lawful ads describe the property, the rent, the amenities, objective terms of tenancy. Discriminatory ads cross the line by expressing who is preferred or excluded based on a protected characteristic like family status or religion. Examiners test whether you can separate discriminatory advertising from three lookalikes. Puffing is harmless opinion about the property. Lawful screening applies neutral criteria like income to all applicants equally. An antitrust tie-in belongs to competition law. None of these involve a preference about a protected class. No matter how innocent the intent, an ad reading adults only or favoring a particular religion is unlawful on its face. The message the eddy sends is all that matters. Question 18. An owner conveys property to a life tenant and names a third party to receive the fee when the life estate ends. Which of the following describes that third party's interest? Your options are A remainder, B, a reversion, C, a possibility of reverter, D, a leasehold. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A, a remainder. A is correct because when the creator of a life estate names a third party to take the fee after the measuring life ends, that party holds a remainder. The remainder man receives full ownership once the life estate terminates. B is wrong because a reversion returns the property to the original grantor, not to a named third party. Because the grantor here designated someone else, the future interest is a remainder rather than a reversion. C is wrong because a possibility of reverter follows a fee simple determinable, not a life estate. It lets a grantor retake land if a stated condition fails, which is a different arrangement entirely. D is wrong because a leasehold is a tenant's possessory interest for a term. The third party receives a future ownership interest in the fee, not a temporary right to rent and occupy the property. When an owner creates a life estate, they must decide where full ownership goes once that measuring life ends. If a named third party is chosen to receive the fee, that person holds what's called a remainder, and they're known as the remainder man. Critically, both interests exist right now at the same time. The life tenant holds the present possessory estate and may use the property, but cannot waste or sell more than their life interest. The remainder man already owns a real, present-future interest. Possession simply waits until the life estate terminates, and no further act is required. Examiners love testing how a remainder differs from other future interests. A reversion goes back to the original grantor, not a named outsider. A possibility of reverter springs back to the grantor only when a condition in a determinable fee is violated. A leasehold is merely a tenant's temporary possessory right, never a future ownership interest in the fee. Whenever a conveyance designates a specific third party to take the fee after a life estate, that interest is a remainder, not a reversion, not a possibility of reverter, and not a leasehold. The name of the taker is the tell. Question 19. Which of the following correctly describes who may properly use the realtor designation under Ohio standards and the rules governing that mark? Your options are A. Any licensee may use it freely. B. It applies only to brokers. C. It is granted by the Commission. D. Only National Association members may use it. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Only National Association members may use it. D is correct because Realtor is a registered trademark and membership designation of the National Association of Realtors, usable only by its members. A licensee of any level who uses it without holding membership misrepresents their credentials under Ohio standards. A is wrong because not every licensee may use the mark freely. Using Realtor without National Association membership is both a misrepresentation of credentials and a misuse of a protected trademark belonging to that association. B is wrong because the designation is not limited to brokers. It depends entirely on association membership. So salespersons and brokers alike may use it when they are members, and neither may use it otherwise. C is wrong because the Commission does not grant the Realtor designation at all. It is a private membership mark of the National Association, not a state-issued credential handed out by Ohio's licensing authority. The word Realtor looks like a job title, but it is actually a registered trademark owned by the National Association of Realtors, a private organization, not a government body. Understanding this distinction is essential for any licensee. The designation signals that a licensee has voluntarily joined the association and agreed to its code of ethics. It is open to members at any license level. A salesperson who joins may use it, while a broker who has not joined may not. Picture two licensees holding identical state licenses. The one who joined the National Association, typically through a local and state board, may advertise as a realtor. The one who never joined, or whose membership lapsed, has no right to use the marker, no matter what license they hold. Examiners target three common misconceptions: that any licensee may freely use the term, that it is reserved for brokers, and that the Commission grants it. All three are false. The right flows solely from National Association membership. Using Realtor without membership is both misrepresentation and trademark misuse. The state license and the association mark are entirely separate credentials, and only the association can confer the right to use its name. Question 20. A lease runs for a fixed term with a definite beginning and ending date, and ends automatically on that date with no notice required. Which leasehold estate is this? Your options are A. Estate for years. B. Periodic tenancy. C. Tenancy at will. D. Tenancy at sufferance. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. Estate for years. A is correct because an estate for years has a fixed beginning and ending date known when the lease is signed. It terminates automatically on the stated end date and no notice is required to end it. B is wrong because a periodic tenancy has no fixed end date and automatically renews until proper notice. The defining mark of an estate for years is a known end date, which a periodic tenancy lacks. C is wrong because the at-will tenancy has no specified term and continues only while both parties consent. Either side may end it at any time, which a lease with a definite ending date does not allow. D is wrong because a tenancy at sufferance arises when a tenant wrongfully holds over after a lease ends. It begins without consent after expiration, not as a fixed-term lease with a set end date. An estate for years is a leasehold estate with a fixed, definite start date and end date agreed upon when the lease is signed. Its defining feature is certainty of duration. The tenancy ends automatically on the stated date. with no notice required from either party. The estate for years requires a known beginning and a known end baked into the lease document itself. Crucially, the name is a misnomer. A lease for 1 month, 1 year, or a decade all qualify, as long as both endpoints are definite and fixed. The lease document itself creates the estate by naming a start date and an end date. That fixed window lets both landlord and tenant plan ahead. The tenant knows exactly how long occupancy lasts, and the landlord knows exactly when the property returns. Examiners test whether you can distinguish these 4 estates by how each one ends. A periodic tenancy renews automatically until proper notice is given. A tenancy at will continues only while both parties consent. A tenancy at sufferance is a wrongful holdover after a lease expires. Only the estate for years has a known automatic ending built in from the start. When a question describes a lease with a specific start date, a specific end date, and no notice requirement to terminate, that is the estate for years. The fixed, knowable termination point is what sets it apart from every other leasehold estate. Question 21. A holder cannot buy at will, but if the owner decides to sell and gets a third-party offer, the holder may match it. Which of the following describes this right? Your options are A. An option, B. An assignment, C. A right of first refusal, D. A contingency. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. A right of first refusal. C is correct because a right of first refusal lets the holder match a bona fide third-party offer if the owner decides to sell. It fixes no price in advance and gives no power to force a sale. A is wrong because an option fixes a price up front and lets the optionee buy at any time during the period regardless of other offers. The described right depends entirely on the owner first choosing to sell. B is wrong because an assignment transfers existing contract rights to a third party. It moves rights someone already holds and has nothing to do with a right to match a future offer on property. D is wrong because a contingency is a condition that must be met for a contract to become binding. It protects a party within a deal, not a standing right to match an owner's future sale. A right of first refusal is a standby right. It lets the holder match a genuine third-party offer, but only once the owner independently decides to sell. It is not a power to force a sale or buy at will. The right sits completely dormant until 2 things happen. The owner freely chooses to sell, and a real third-party offer comes in. Only then must the owner present those terms to the holder. Once triggered, the holder has a set window to match the offer on the outsider's exact terms. Same price, same conditions. If the holder matches, they buy. If they decline, the owner proceeds with the third party. The key distinction examiners test is the contrast with an option. An option fixes a price up front and lets the holder buy at any time. An affirmative power. A right of first refusal sets no price and grants no power to initiate. It is purely defensive. A right of first refusal protects the holder's interest without tying the owner's hands. The owner retains full control over if and when a sale ever happens. The holder can only react, never initiate. Question 22. Both parties agree to end their contract and return all money and property exchanged, restoring each side to its pre-contract position. Which of the following describes this? Your options are A. Specific performance, B. Rescission, C. Assignment, D. Acceleration. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is B. Rescission. B is correct because rescission terminates a contract and returns the parties to their pre-contract positions with all money and property exchanged given back. It can be agreed mutually or granted as a remedy for misconduct. A is wrong because specific performance compels a party to perform the contract rather than undo it. Restoring the parties to where they began is the opposite of forcing the deal to completion. C is wrong because assignment transfers contract rights to a third party. It moves rights to someone new, not a mutual unwinding that returns both original parties to their starting positions. D is wrong because acceleration is a lender's power to call a loan balance due on default. It belongs to mortgage lending and has nothing to do with mutually cancelling a contract and restoring positions. Rescission is the legal mechanism for completely unwinding a contract. Not enforcing it, not awarding damages, but erasing it entirely. The goal is to restore both parties to exactly where they stood before the agreement was ever made. For rescission to work, whatever changed hands must go back. It is a two-way restoration, not just one side getting relief, but both walking away as though nothing was ever signed. Rescission can arise in two ways: by mutual agreement, when both sides simply decide to call the deal off, or as a court-ordered remedy when one party was misled or defrauded into signing. Examiners test whether you can distinguish rescission from three look-alike concepts. Specific performance forces completion, the opposite of rescission. Assignment keeps the contract alive by transferring rights to a third party. Acceleration is a lender's default remedy unrelated to cancelling a sale. Only rescission unwinds the deal entirely. When you see a scenario where both parties agree to end a contract and return everything exchanged, or where a court erases a deal induced by fraud, that is rescission, a clean exit that puts everyone back at square one. Question 23. Which of the following correctly describes the membership of the Ohio Real Estate Commission? The state's rulemaking and appellate body for licensees. Your options are A. 9 members elected by licensees. B. 3 members, all licensed brokers. C. 7 members appointed by the superintendent. D. 5 members, 4 brokers and 1 public. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. 5 members, 4 brokers and 1 public. D is correct because the commission has 5 members appointed by the governor with the Senate's consent. 4 must have been licensed brokers for the 10 years before appointment, and 1 represents the public, serving staggered 5-year terms. A is wrong because licensees do not elect the commission. Its 5 members are gubernatorial appointees confirmed by the Senate, a structure designed to keep the policy body independent. B is wrong because the commission has 5 members, not 3, and 1 of them is a public member unconnected to real estate rather than an all-broker panel. C is wrong because the governor appoints commission members with the Senate's advice and consent. The superintendent runs the division's work and does not appoint the commissioners. The Ohio Real Estate Commission is the state's rulemaking and appellate body for real estate licensees. Understanding its exact composition is the key to answering exam questions about it correctly. The commission has exactly 5 members. 4 must have been licensed real estate brokers for the 10 years immediately before appointment. The 5th is a public member with no ties to the real estate industry, ensuring a consumer voice at the table. All 5 members are appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. Not elected by licensees. Staggered 5-year terms mean seats turn over gradually, preserving institutional memory as experienced members remain while new ones join. The Commission adopts the administrative rules that flesh out Ohio's license law, issues the canons of ethics governing professional conduct, and serves as the appellate body reviewing disciplinary decisions made at the staff level. When an exam question asks about commission membership, anchor on the precise figures: 5 members total, 4 experienced brokers, and 1 public member. It is not elected, not 7 members, and not appointed by the superintendent. That is the division's day-to-day administrator. Question 24. Under Ohio's agency statute, an agency relationship with a seller or buyer is created principally by which of the following? Your options are A. A verbal handshake agreement, B. Payment of a commission, C. A signed written agency agreement, D. Submitting the listing to the MLS. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is C. A signed written agency agreement. C is correct because Ohio grounds agency in a written agency agreement signed by the client, such as a listing agreement or a buyer agency agreement. The relationship is established by that written engagement rather than left to implication. A is wrong because Ohio does not rely on verbal understandings to create agency. The statute requires a signed written agreement so consumers know in writing exactly who represents them. B is wrong because the source of compensation does not establish representation. A buyer's agent paid from the seller's proceeds still represents the buyer. Agency comes from the agreement, not the payment. D is wrong because submitting a listing to the multiple listing service is a marketing step. It distributes information to cooperating brokers but does not itself form the agency relationship with the client. In Ohio, an agency relationship between a licensee and a client is created by a signed written agreement. This isn't left to chance, conversation, or conduct. The law requires a document. On the seller side, it's the listing agreement. On the buyer side, it's the buyer agency agreement. In both cases, the client's signature is what legally forms the relationship and triggers the licensee's fiduciary duties. The moment the client signs, the agency relationship is formed. The written agreement defines the scope, the term, and the compensation, making the relationship clear, provable, and not dependent on anyone's memory. Examiners test whether you can separate the true source of agency from things that merely look related. A verbal handshake, payment of a commission, submission to the MLS, or showing a property. None of these create an agency relationship in Ohio. Remember, Ohio grounds agency in a signed written document, not in conduct or money. If the client hasn't signed an agreement, no agency exists, no matter what else has happened. Question 25. One agent is authorized to do virtually anything the principal could do personally, with almost unlimited authority. Which classification fits this rarely seen relationship? Your options are A. A special agent, B. A universal agent, C. A sub-agent, D. A facilitator. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is B. A universal agent. B is correct because a universal agent holds virtually unlimited authority to act on the principal's behalf in essentially any matter the principal could handle personally. A court-appointed guardian is the typical example. It is rare in ordinary real estate. A is wrong because a special agent's authority is confined to a single act or transaction. That narrow scope is the direct opposite of the sweeping authority the question describes. C is wrong because a sub-agent simply represents the broker's client through the broker. Sub-agency describes who is served, not whether the authority is broad or unlimited. D is wrong because a facilitator represents neither party and merely assists with the transaction. That role concerns representation, not the breadth of authority granted to an agent. In agency law, authority exists on a spectrum. The universal agent sits at the very top of that spectrum, holding the broadest possible grant of power to act on a principal's behalf. There are 4 agency classifications. The universal agent holds sweeping, nearly unlimited authority. The general agent handles a range of ongoing tasks. The special agent is limited to one transaction. The facilitator represents neither party at all. The key distinction is always scope of authority. A guardian appointed by a court to manage all of a ward's affairs. selling property, paying bills, handling investments, is the clearest real-world example of a universal agent. Universal agency arises only when someone genuinely needs another person to handle the full sweep of their affairs. Because it carries real risk, it is rarely seen in ordinary real estate practice, where narrower special agency arrangements are the norm. When a scenario describes an agent who can do virtually anything the principal could do personally, that is the universal agent, the rare, sweeping grant of nearly unlimited authority that stands apart from every other agency classification. Question 26. Before the seller has accepted, a buyer communicates that the written offer to purchase is withdrawn. Which of the following describes the buyer's action? Your options are A. Revocation, B. Rescission, C. Novation, D. Acceptance. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A. Revocation. A is correct because revocation is the offeror withdrawing an offer before it is accepted. The buyer who pulls back the offer before the seller accepts has revoked it, and the communicated withdrawal ends the offer. B is wrong because rescission unwinds an existing contract and returns the parties to their pre-contract positions. There is no contract yet to unwind here. Only an unaccepted offer is being pulled back. C is wrong because novation substitutes a new party or new contract for an old one with everyone's consent. That requires an existing agreement to replace, which a withdrawn offer is not. D is wrong because acceptance is the offeree agreeing to be bound by the offer's terms. The buyer is doing the opposite of forming a contract. The offer is being taken off the table. Before a contract exists, an offer is just a proposal, and the person who made it can take it back. This power to withdraw is called revocation, and understanding exactly when and how it works is essential in real estate law. Revocation only works if two conditions are satisfied. It must happen before acceptance, and it must be communicated to the other side. If the seller signs before the buyer's withdrawal reaches them, a contract has already formed and revocation comes too late. Picture the offer sitting on a timeline. From the moment it is made, there is a window during which the buyer can revoke. The instant the seller accepts, that window closes, a contract exists, and the buyer is bound. Examiners often test whether you can separate revocation from three look-alike concepts. Rescission unwinds a contract that already exists. Novation substitutes a new party or agreement into an existing one. Acceptance is the offeree saying yes, the exact opposite of the offerer pulling the offer away. Whenever you see a buyer withdrawing an offer, ask one question. Had the seller already accepted? If the answer is no, the withdrawal is a valid revocation. If yes, a contract existed and the buyer no longer had the power to simply walk away. Question 27. A broker uses earnest money held for a client to pay the brokerage's own bills. Which prohibited act has the broker committed? Your options are A. Commingling, B. Conversion, C. Puffing, D. Subagency. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is B. Conversion. B is correct because conversion is using client trust funds for the broker's own personal or business purposes. Spending a client's earnest money on the brokerage's bills is conversion, a serious violation that can bring criminal charges. A is wrong because commingling is mixing client funds with the broker's own money, such as depositing them in the wrong account. Actually spending the funds goes further and is conversion. C is wrong because puffing is harmless sales exaggeration about a property's appeal, like calling a view spectacular. It is a marketing opinion and has nothing to do with the misuse or theft of client funds. D is wrong because subagency describes a licensee representing another broker's client through that broker. It is an agency relationship concept and is entirely unrelated to misappropriating money held in trust. When a broker uses client trust funds for their own purposes, that act has a specific name: conversion. It is the most serious trust account violation in real estate law, going beyond simple mishandling into outright misappropriation. Conversion has three defining elements. The money belongs to the client and sits in a protected account. The broker then draws on it for their own ends, paying rent, covering payroll, or meeting any personal obligation. And critically, the violation is complete the moment those funds are spent, regardless of any plan to repay. Examiners love testing the line between commingling and conversion. Commingling is mixing client funds with the broker's own money. The funds are in the wrong place but have not been spent. Conversion goes further. The broker actually uses the client's money. One is improper mixing, the other is improper spending. Think of the trust account as a locked box the broker holds but does not own. The broker is purely a custodian. The moment the broker reaches into that box to pay a business expense, the custodian relationship is broken and conversion occurs. The gravest consequences: license revocation and potential criminal charges follow conversion precisely because it is theft, not just a paperwork error. If a question describes a broker spending client funds for any broker purpose, that is conversion, full stop. Question 28. Years after a sale closes, a buyer asks the former listing agent what the past seller's bottom line price had been. Under Ohio law, the agent must do which of the following? Your options are: A. Share it since the agency ended. B. Reveal it only to a new client. C. Keep the information confidential. D. Disclose it if no harm results. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is C. Keep the information confidential. C is correct because the confidentiality duty survives termination of the agency and runs perpetually. The former agent may not reveal the past seller's bottom line price to any third party, including the buyer, even long after closing. A is wrong because the end of the agency does not release confidential information. Ohio's confidentiality duty continues after termination, so closing the transaction does not free the agent to talk. B is wrong because a new client gains no special right to a former client's confidences. The agent cannot recycle the past seller's bottom line to advantage anyone in a later deal. D is wrong because the duty does not hinge on whether harm results. The protection is categorical and perpetual, so the agent cannot disclose simply by judging the disclosure harmless. In Ohio real estate, the duty of confidentiality doesn't end when a transaction closes or an agency relationship terminates. It runs perpetually, attached to the information itself, not to the length of the relationship. When an agency ends, duties like loyalty and obedience dissolve. But confidentiality is categorically different. It attaches to the protected information and follows it indefinitely, no matter how much time passes. Picture a seller who told her agent the lowest price she'd accept. That bottom line price is sealed permanently, even years later. If a new buyer asks that same former agent what the seller would have taken, the agent must refuse. The shield never lifts. Examiners test whether students know this duty is unconditional. The agency ending, time passing, a new client asking, or harm seeming unlikely. None of these create an exception. The prohibition is flat and absolute. Ohio's perpetual confidentiality rule ensures clients can be candid with their agents without fear. What a client shares in confidence stays confidential forever, not just until closing, and not just until it seems harmless to share. Question 29. A licensee collecting rents for several owners deposits all of it into the brokerage's operating account. Which of the following violations does this represent? Your options are: A. Steering. B. A blind ad violation. C. Unauthorized practice of law. D. Commingling of trust funds. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is D. Commingling of trust funds. D is correct because rent collected for property owners is trust money and must be held in a separate property management trust account, not mixed with brokerage operating funds. Depositing it into the operating account is commingling, exposing the licensee to discipline. A is wrong because steering is a fair housing violation involving directing buyers by protected traits. It has no connection to how a property manager deposits the rent she collects. B is wrong because a blind ad violation concerns advertising that conceals the brokerage's identity from the public. The problem here is mixing owner's rent with operating money, a trust fund failure that has no connection to advertising disclosure. C is wrong because unauthorized practice of law involves giving legal advice or drafting reserved documents. Mishandling owner's rent money is a trust account violation, not a legal practice issue. Commingling isn't just about earnest money. Any client funds a licensee holds, including rent collected on behalf of property owners, must be kept separate from the brokerage's own money. When a licensee manages rentals, each owner's rent must go into a dedicated property management trust account. It stays separate, it's tracked by owner, and it's only dispersed according to the management agreement. The rule is simple segregation. Owner's rent flows into the trust account. The brokerage's own money lives in the operating account. Crossing that line in either direction is commingling, and it exposes the licensee to discipline even if no money is ever stolen. Examiners test whether you can isolate the correct violation. Steering, blind ad violation, and unauthorized practice of law are real wrongs, but none involve fund handling. Depositing owner's rent into the operating account is specifically commingling of trust funds. No matter how good the bookkeeping, if owner's rent sits in the brokerage's operating account, it's commingling. A separate trust account is the only compliant choice. Question 30. Which of the following best describes when an Ohio broker must deposit earnest money into the trust account after an offer is accepted? Your options are A. Promptly, generally by the next business day. B. Only after the deal closes. C. Within 30 days of closing. D. Whenever the broker chooses. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Promptly, generally by the next business day. A is correct because earnest money must be deposited in the trust account promptly, generally by the end of the next business day after acceptance of the offer. It is then held according to the purchase agreement until the deal resolves. B is wrong because the deposit obligation is triggered by acceptance of the offer long before settlement. Waiting until the deal actually closes leaves client funds sitting unprotected for weeks and breaks the prompt deposit requirement entirely. C is wrong because the deposit deadline runs from acceptance of the offer, not from closing. Waiting 30 days past closing would leave the funds undeposited far too long. D is wrong because the timing is not left to the broker's discretion. A prompt deposit, generally by the next business day after acceptance, is required to protect the funds. In Ohio, once a seller accepts an offer, the broker's duty to deposit earnest money into a trust account is immediately triggered. The clock starts at acceptance, not at closing. The moment a binding contract is formed through the seller's acceptance, the broker must move the earnest money into a trust account. Generally by the end of the next business day, there is no discretion and no waiting for inspections or closing. Once deposited, the funds sit securely in the trust account, documented and protected, governed by the terms of the purchase agreement until the deal closes or the parties direct the money's release. Examiners test whether you can identify the correct trigger and deadline. Waiting until after closing is far too late. 30 days after closing misreads the rule entirely, and the timing is never left to the broker's discretion. The correct answer is always by the end of the next business day after acceptance. Whenever you see a question about Ohio earnest money timing, anchor yourself to two things. Acceptance triggers the duty, and the deposit must be made promptly, generally by the next business day. Question 31. Which of the following Ohio bodies processes applications, issues licenses, investigates complaints, audits brokers, and brings disciplinary cases day to day? Your options are A. The Ohio Real Estate Commission, B. The Division of Real Estate, C. The Ohio Civil Rights Commission, D. The Appraiser Board. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is B. The Division of Real Estate. B is correct because the Division of Real Estate and Professional Licensing administers and enforces the license law every day. It processes applications, issues licenses, investigates complaints, audits brokers, and prosecutes disciplinary cases through its staff and investigators. A is wrong because the Commission is the rule-making and appellate body. It adopts rules and the canons of ethics and hears appeals, but it does not run the day-to-day licensing and investigative work. C is wrong because the Ohio Civil Rights Commission enforces the state anti-discrimination law. Fair housing complaints go there, not routine real estate licensing, auditing, or broker discipline. D is wrong because the Appraiser Board regulates appraisers under a separate chapter. It has its own membership and standards and plays no part in licensing or disciplining real estate brokers and salespersons. Ohio's real estate regulatory system has several bodies, but one does the daily hands-on work, the Division of Real Estate and Professional Licensing. Understanding what the division actually does and how it differs from the other bodies is the key concept here. The division handles the full administrative and investigative cycle. It receives applications, issues licenses, sends investigators into the field, audits brokers' trust account records, and prosecutes disciplinary cases through its own staff and attorneys, every operational step from intake to enforcement. Take a concrete example. A consumer reports that a broker mishandled trust money. The division receives the complaint, assigns an investigator, audits the accounts, and prosecutes the case if the facts warrant. Only if the broker appeals does the commission, the appellate body, enter the picture. The exam tests whether you can tell these bodies apart. The Ohio Real Estate Commission makes rules and hears appeals but does not run daily licensing. The Civil Rights Commission handles fair housing discrimination complaints. The Appraiser Board regulates appraisers only. Anything involving licensing, investigation, or discipline of brokers and salespersons belongs to the division. When a question describes processing applications, issuing licenses, investigating complaints, auditing brokers, or prosecuting disciplinary cases, the answer is the Division of Real Estate, Ohio's permanent operational and enforcement engine. Question 32. When a brokerage's only broker dies, which of the following may be appointed to wind down or temporarily continue its pending business under the division's oversight? Your options are A. A licensed broker as ancillary trustee, B. An unlicensed office manager, C. The deceased broker's attorney automatically, D. Any affiliated salesperson immediately. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is A. A licensed broker as ancillary trustee. A is correct because a licensed broker may be appointed as ancillary trustee to wind down or temporarily continue the deceased or incapacitated broker's brokerage. The trustee completes pending transactions and protects clients' funds and records under the division's oversight. B is wrong because an unlicensed office manager cannot perform or oversee licensed brokerage activity. The ancillary trustee role must be filled by a licensed broker, not unlicensed staff. C is wrong because the deceased broker's attorney is not automatically empowered to run the brokerage. The mechanism appoints a licensed broker as ancillary trustee to handle pending business. D is wrong because affiliated salespersons lose their active status the moment the broker dies. Since they have no sponsor, they cannot step in. A licensed broker serves as ancillary trustee instead. When a one-broker firm loses its only broker, Ohio law doesn't leave clients stranded. A special mechanism exists to keep pending deals and trust funds protected during the transition. The ancillary trustee is a licensed broker appointed to step in when the sole broker dies. Operating under the division's supervision, the trustee completes pending transactions, protects trust funds, and preserves records, work that only a licensed broker can lawfully perform. Examiners test who is disqualified: an office manager, the broker's attorney, affiliated salespersons, and any unlicensed staff cannot serve. Because performing or overseeing brokerage activity requires a broker's license, which none of them hold, affiliated salespersons lose their active status the instant the broker dies, because their license depends on a sponsoring broker. Without that sponsor, they have no authority to operate the firm or handle its obligations independently. When a sole broker dies, only a licensed broker appointed as ancillary trustee can bridge the gap, protecting clients, funds, and records until the firm's affairs are responsibly closed or transferred. Question 33. Under which of the following listings does the seller owe no commission if the seller personally finds the buyer, yet owes one if any agent procures the buyer? Your options are: A. Option listing, B. Exclusive right to sell listing, C. Net listing, D. Exclusive agency listing. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is D. Exclusive agency listing. D is correct because in an exclusive agency listing, one broker represents the seller, but the seller reserves the right to sell personally without paying a commission. If any agent, including the listing broker, procures the buyer, the commission is owed. A is wrong because an option listing is not one of the recognized Ohio listing types described in the material. The arrangement that reserves the seller's right to sell personally is the exclusive agency. B is wrong because an exclusive right to sell listing owes the broker a commission regardless of who finds the buyer, including the seller. The seller's own sale would still trigger the fee. C is wrong because a net listing turns on the seller's set net amount, with the broker keeping any excess. It does not hinge on whether the seller or an agent located the buyer. An exclusive agency listing gives one broker the exclusive right to market a property, but with a crucial carve-out. The seller reserves the personal right to find a buyer on her own, and if she does, no commission is owed. The entire arrangement turns on who procures the buyer. If the seller personally closes the deal, no agents involved, she owes nothing. But if the listing broker or any cooperating broker brings the buyer, the commission is triggered. The source of the buyer is everything. Here the structure becomes clear. The seller is tied to one dedicated broker who is protected against competing firms, but the seller's own direct path to a buyer remains open and commission-free. That reserved escape hatch is the defining feature of the exclusive agency listing. Contrast this with other listing types. An exclusive right to sell listing owes the broker a commission no matter who finds the buyer, even the seller herself. A net listing hinges on the seller's target net figure, not buyer source. An option listing is not a recognized standard type. Only the exclusive agency listing preserves the seller's personal sale exemption. When a question describes a listing where the seller owes nothing if she personally finds the buyer, but owes a commission if any agent does, that is always the exclusive agency listing. The reserved right of personal sale is its defining mark. Question 34. Which of the following rules generally bars a party from using prior oral statements to contradict the terms of a final written contract the parties signed? Your options are A. The statute of frauds, B. The mirror image rule, C. The parole evidence rule, D. The doctrine of part performance. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is C. The parole evidence rule. C is correct because the parole evidence rule generally bars prior oral statements offered to contradict the terms of a final written contract. Once the parties reduce their deal to a signed writing, that writing controls its terms. A is wrong because the statute of frauds requires certain contracts to be written and signed to be enforceable. It dictates when a writing is needed, not whether outside statements may contradict an existing one. B is wrong because the mirror image rule requires acceptance to match the offer exactly. It governs how a contract forms during negotiation, not the use of prior statements against a completed writing. D is wrong because part performance is an equitable exception that can enforce some oral land contracts. It is a route around the writing requirement, not a rule excluding evidence that contradicts a writing. The parole evidence rule is a foundational contract doctrine that protects the integrity of signed written agreements. Once parties reduce their deal to a final writing, that document becomes the definitive expression of their agreement. The rule operates by excluding any earlier oral or written statements that would contradict or change the terms of the completed agreement. The signed writing controls, and earlier conversations, no matter what was promised, cannot override what the document says. Picture the negotiation phase on one side and the signed contract on the other. The parole evidence rule acts as a barrier. Any prior promise or conversation that contradicts the written terms simply cannot cross over to alter the finished deal. Examiners love to test the parole evidence rule against neighboring doctrines. The statute of frauds governs when a writing is required. The mirror image rule controls how acceptances must match offers. Part performance is an equitable exception to the writing requirement. Only the parole evidence rule addresses prior statements contradicting a completed writing. When a fact pattern describes someone trying to use a pre-signing conversation to contradict a final written contract, that is the parole evidence rule at work, protecting the finished document from being undermined by what was said before the ink dried. Question 35. Which of the following describes a brokerage that represents both the seller and the buyer in the same real estate transaction under Ohio law? Your options are A. A sub-agent, B. A designated agent, C. A transaction broker, D. A dual agent. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. A dual agent. D is correct because a dual agent is a licensee or brokerage representing both the seller and the buyer in one transaction. Ohio permits it only with the prior informed written consent of both parties. A is wrong because a subagent represents only the seller, typically a cooperating licensee on the seller's side. Representing one party is the opposite of standing in for both sides at once. B is wrong because designated agency assigns two different licensees within one brokerage to opposite parties. Each represents a single side, so neither personally serves both the seller and the buyer. C is wrong because transaction broker is not the term Ohio statute uses for representing both parties. The statute frames this conflict as dual agency governed by its own consent rule. Dual agency occurs when a single licensee or brokerage represents both the seller and the buyer in the same real estate transaction. This creates an inherent conflict of interest because both parties have opposing goals. Ohio law strictly conditions dual agency on 3 requirements. Consent must be prior, meaning given before representation begins. Informed, meaning both parties genuinely understand what they are giving up. And written, meaning documented on paper. All 3 must be satisfied. Because the dual agent owes duties to both sides simultaneously, full advocacy for one party would betray the other. The agent becomes a neutral facilitator, helping the deal move forward while protecting each party's confidential information and taking neither side. Examiners often test whether you can distinguish dual agency from similar structures. Subagency represents only the seller. Designated agency assigns 2 separate licensees within one brokerage to opposite sides. Transaction broker is not the term Ohio statute uses. Only dual agency means one licensee serving both parties at once. Dual agency is inherently conflicted, but Ohio permits it because informed parties have the right to choose it. That choice must always be documented through prior, informed, written consent from both the seller and the buyer before the representation proceeds. Question 36. A community qualifies as housing for older persons and is therefore freed from one specific federal prohibition. From which protected class is it exempt? Your options are A. Race, B. Familial status, C. Disability, D. National origin. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is B. Familial status. B is correct because qualifying older persons housing is exempt only from the familial status prohibition, allowing it to limit residency by age. The other 6 federal classes still fully apply to senior communities. A is wrong because race is never exempt under any provision, and the senior exemption does not touch it. Older persons housing may set an age requirement but may never discriminate on the basis of race. C is wrong because disability protections remain fully enforced for senior housing, which must still accommodate residents with disabilities. The older person's exemption is limited to familial status and does not reach the disability class. D is wrong because national origin stays protected in older persons' communities, just as in any other housing. The exemption narrowly reaches familial status alone, allowing an age limit but no other form of discrimination. Federal fair housing law protects 7 classes from housing discrimination. One of those classes, familial status, has a narrow, carefully defined exception built around age-restricted communities. When a community qualifies as housing for older persons, it receives exactly one carve-out. It may restrict residency by age, which would otherwise violate the familial status protection. Every other protected class remains fully in force. The exemption does not relax any other rule. An older person's community cannot refuse applicants based on race, national origin, or religion, and it must still accommodate residents with disabilities. The carve-out touches none of those classes. Qualifying older persons housing earns a single legal freedom, the age-based limit on families with children. Any answer suggesting the exemption extends to race, disability, or any other class has misread its precise and narrow scope. Question 37. A salesperson wants to offer a gift card to anyone who lists with her. Which of the following conditions must this inducement satisfy under Ohio rules? Your options are A. Larger than the listed commission, B. Paid from a client's escrow, C. Offered through the broker and truthful, D. Approved by the appraiser board. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C, offered through the broker and truthful. C is correct because an inducement such as a gift card must be offered through the broker, be consistent with the broker's policy, be truthful, and comply with the advertising rules and RIA-CA. The licensee must actually be able to provide it. A is wrong because an inducement is not required to exceed the commission and has no such size rule. What matters is that it runs through the broker, is truthful, and follows advertising and RIA-CA rules. B is wrong because an inducement may never be funded from a client's escrow. Trust money belongs to clients, and tapping it for a promotional gift would be conversion of those funds. D is wrong because the appraiser board does not approve marketing inducements. The conditions come from the broker's authorization and truthfulness rules, not from any appraisal body. When a licensee offers something of value, like a gift card, to attract listings, that's called an inducement. Ohio doesn't ban them, but it does impose specific conditions that must all be met for the offer to be permissible. There are 4 conditions. The inducement must run through the broker and fit firm policy, be truthful and follow advertising rules, comply with Federal Settlement Services law, and the licensee must genuinely be able to deliver it. Every one of these must be satisfied. The broker sits at the center of this process. The salesperson proposes the inducement, the broker authorizes it, and only then does it reach the public. Routing it through the broker keeps the firm accountable for every promise its licensees make. Examiners test whether you can separate real conditions from invented ones. Broker authorization, truthfulness, advertising compliance, and RIA-CA compliance are genuine requirements. There is no size threshold, no rule that the inducement must exceed the commission, and the appraiser board has no role whatsoever in approving marketing offers. Remember, an inducement is fine when it's honest, broker authorized, and something the licensee can actually provide. It may never be funded from a client's escrow. That money belongs to the client. Meet those conditions and the gift card is perfectly permissible. Question 38. A principal's own words lead a third party to reasonably believe an agency exists and to rely on it, barring the principal from denying it. Which doctrine applies? Your options are A. Agency, B. Estoppel, B. Agency by ratification, C. Express agency, D. Subagency. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Agency, B. Estoppel. A is correct because estoppel prevents a person from denying an agency when that person's own words or conduct caused a third party to reasonably believe the agency existed and to act on that belief. The principal is held to the appearance created. B is wrong because ratification validates a specific unauthorized act after the principal approves it. Estoppel instead bars denial of an agency based on the impression the principal created for others. C is wrong because express agency rests on an actual stated agreement, oral or written. The doctrine here operates precisely because no genuine grant of authority was made. D is wrong because subagency describes an agent serving the broker's client through the broker. It identifies a representation chain, not a rule barring denial of an apparent agency. Agency by estoppel is a doctrine that holds a principal to the appearance of agency he created, even when no real authority was ever granted. The law protects innocent third parties who reasonably trusted that appearance. The doctrine has 2 essential parts. First, the principal must have said or done something that created the appearance of agency. A belief the third party invented on their own is not enough. Second, the third party's reliance must be objectively reasonable under the circumstances. When the principal's conduct creates a believable appearance of agency and the third party reasonably acts on it, estoppel kicks in. The principal is barred, stopped, from later claiming no agency existed and is bound as if the agency were real. Examiners love testing estoppel against three lookalikes. Ratification validates a specific unauthorized act after it happens. Express agency rests on an actual stated agreement. Subagency describes a representation chain. Estoppel is unique because no real authority was ever created. Only in appearance the principle must now honor. Estoppel exists because fairness demands that the person who created or tolerated a misleading appearance bears the consequences, not the innocent party who reasonably trusted it. Question 39. 2 weeks after a home is listed, it is destroyed by fire. What happens to the listing agreement as a result? Your options are: A. It transfers to a nearby property. B. It converts to an open listing. C. It terminates by operation of law. D. It continues until the end date. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is C. It terminates by operation of law. C is correct because destruction of the property terminates the agency by operation of law, because the purpose of the agency, selling that property, can no longer be accomplished. There is no longer a property to market. A is wrong because a listing is tied to the specific parcel described in it and cannot shift to a different property. When that parcel is gone, the agency's purpose fails entirely. B is wrong because the listing does not survive as a lesser open listing. Loss of the subject property ends the agency itself, not merely its exclusivity. D is wrong because the fixed end date is irrelevant once the property is destroyed. The agency ends immediately by operation of law rather than running to its scheduled expiration. A listing agreement is an agency contract, and like all agencies, it can end not just by the party's choice but by operation of law, meaning the law itself terminates it when certain events occur. When a listed property is destroyed, the listing terminates automatically, not because anyone chose to end it, but because the agency's sole purpose, selling that specific property, can no longer be accomplished. No notice is needed. The same principle applies when a party dies. The moment the house burns down, the listing is gone. The broker cannot redirect the agency to a nearby property, and the agreement does not quietly survive in any reduced form. Examiners test whether you know what does not happen. The listing does not shift to a different parcel, does not convert to an open listing, does not limp along to its scheduled expiration, and requires no formal cancellation. The destruction alone ends it. When the subject property is destroyed, the agency's purpose fails and the listing terminates by operation of law, instantly and completely, with nothing more required. Question 40. An appraiser distinguishes what a property should bring from what it actually sold for. Which of the following best describes market value as opposed to market price? Your options are either dollars spent to build, B, an opinion of probable selling price, C, the actual recorded sale figure, D, the assessed value for taxes. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is B, an opinion of probable selling price. B is correct because market value is an opinion of the most probable price a property should bring in a fair, open market sale. Price is the actual figure a property did sell for, a historical fact rather than an estimate. A is wrong because dollars spent to build describes cost, not value. Cost reflects what creating the improvement required and may equal value only by chance, usually for new construction at its best use. C is wrong because the actual recorded sale figure is the market price, the very thing value is being contrasted with. Value is an estimate of probable price, while price is what already occurred. D is wrong because assessed value is a figure used for property taxation. It is a separate tax concept and is not the open market opinion of probable selling price that defines market value. Two terms that sound nearly identical are actually measuring completely different things. Market value and market price each have a precise definition, and mixing them up is one of the most common mistakes on the real estate exam. Market value is a forward-looking opinion, what a property should sell for under typical open market conditions. Market price is backward-looking, what a property actually sold for in a completed transaction. Cost and assessed value are two related sounding terms that mean something different entirely. An appraiser develops market value through analysis, reviewing comparable sales, income, or cost data to estimate what a property ought to bring. Market price, on the other hand, requires no analysis at all. It is simply the dollar amount that changed hands when the deal closed. A sale can close above or below market value because of non-typical conditions, a distressed seller, an unusual buyer, a hurried timeline, or a personal relationship between the parties. That is why the recorded price from one particular deal may not reflect normal market behavior. Keep it simple. Market value is the appraiser's opinion of what a property should bring. Market price is the historical record of what it actually brought. They can differ, and both can be true at the same time. Question 41. A seller markets a home as is. Regarding known latent material defects, what does selling as is actually mean for the seller? Your options are: known defects must still be disclosed. B. No disclosure of any defects is needed. C. The buyer waives all inspection rights. D. Caveat emptor fully shields the seller. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is A. Known defects must still be disclosed. A is correct because selling as is means the seller will not make repairs, but it does not eliminate the duty to disclose known material defects. The seller must still honestly disclose latent defects within actual knowledge. B is wrong because as is does not excuse disclosure of known defects. It addresses who pays for repairs, not whether the seller may conceal conditions the seller knows about. C is wrong because as is does not strip the buyer of the ability to inspect. Buyers may still investigate, as it simply signals the seller will not undertake repairs. D is wrong because caveat emptor does not protect a seller who conceals a known latent defect or answers a direct question falsely, as is provides no shield for active concealment. Selling a property as is widely misunderstood. It governs who pays for repairs, not whether the seller must be honest about what they know. An as-is sale allocates repair costs to the buyer, but it does not erase the seller's honesty obligation. The seller must still disclose any known latent material defect, a hidden problem an ordinary inspection would not uncover. A latent defect is exactly this, something hidden beneath the surface that a buyer walking through the home on a dry day simply cannot discover. Only the seller knows it exists, which is precisely why disclosure is required, as it provides no shield for active concealment or fraud. The buyer retains full inspection rights, and caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, does not protect a seller who hides a known defect or lies in answer to a direct question. Known latent material defects must always be disclosed, even in an as-is sale. The law separates the refusal to repair from the duty not to deceive. As-is means no repairs, not no honesty. Question 42. The Federal Fair Housing Act, as amended, prohibits housing discrimination based on 7 protected characteristics. Which of the following is one of those protected classes? Your options are A. Marital status, B. Source of income, C. Occupation, D. Familial status. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is D. Familial status. D is correct because familial status is one of the 7 federal protected classes added by the 1988 amendments. The full list is race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, and disability. A is wrong because marital status is not a federal fair housing protected class, though some state and local laws cover it. The federal 7 do not include marital status. B is wrong because source of income is not protected under the Federal Act. Only certain local ordinances reach it. It is not among the 7 federal classes. C is wrong because occupation is not a protected characteristic under federal fair housing law. The Act lists race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, and disability. The Federal Fair Housing Act prohibits housing discrimination based on 7 specific protected characteristics. Understanding exactly which 7 classes are covered and which are not is essential for fair housing practice. The original 1968 Act covered race, color, religion, and national origin. A 1974 amendment added sex. Then the 1988 amendments expanded protections to include familial status, protecting households with children under 18 and pregnant persons, and disability, requiring equal housing access for people with disabilities. The 7 classes were added incrementally as Congress recognized where housing discrimination had been most pervasive and harmful. Together, they define the federal floor of protection that applies everywhere in the country. A common exam trap is confusing the federal 7 with characteristics that sound protected but are not federally covered. Marital status, source of income, and occupation are not among the federal 7. Some may be covered by state or local law, but they are not part of the federal baseline. State and local laws may add further protected classes on top of the federal 7, but the federal list is fixed. When a question asks about federal fair housing, the answer always comes back to those 7 specific classes. Question 43. A seller refuses to close on a signed purchase agreement, and the buyer asks a court to compel conveyance because the property is unique. Which remedy is the buyer seeking? Your options are A. Specific performance, B. Liquidated damages, C. Rescission, D. Novation. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is A. Specific performance. A is correct because specific performance compels the breaching party to carry out the contract as written. It is available in real estate because each parcel is unique, so money damages cannot fully replace the bargained for property. B is wrong because liquidated damages is a pre-agreed sum a breaching party owes, often the forfeited earnest money. It compensates with money rather than forcing the seller to actually convey the property. C is wrong because rescission unwinds the contract and returns both parties to their starting positions. A buyer seeking to force the sale wants the property delivered, which is the opposite of cancelling the deal. D is wrong because novation substitutes a new party or contract for the original. It is a way to replace obligations, not a remedy a buyer uses to make a defaulting seller go through with closing. Specific performance is a court-ordered remedy that compels a breaching seller to actually convey real property, rather than simply paying money damages. It applies in real estate because land is treated as unique. No 2 parcels are identical in location and character, because every parcel of land is one of a kind. A buyer who loses the specific property cannot simply buy an equivalent with damages. Courts recognize this, and so they have the power to order the seller to complete the transaction on the agreed terms. The buyer sues, demonstrates a valid contract and the seller's refusal to perform, and asks the court to compel the sale. If granted, the court decree directs the seller to deliver the deed and complete the transaction, delivering the actual property, not a check standing in for it. Examiners test whether you can separate specific performance from remedies that compensate or undo rather than compel. Liquidated damages pays a pre-agreed sum. Rescission unwinds the deal entirely. Novation replaces a party or obligation. Only specific performance forces the contracted conveyance to happen. Whenever a scenario describes a buyer asking a court to force a reluctant seller to convey because the property is unique, that is specific performance, the remedy that delivers the actual bargain, not a substitute. Question 44. Which of the following Ohio bodies regulates appraisers under its own membership and standards, entirely separate from the real estate licensing structure? Your options are A. The Ohio Real Estate Commission, B. The Division of Real Estate, C. The Ohio Real Estate Appraiser Board, D. The Department of Commerce. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is C. The Ohio Real Estate Appraiser Board. C is correct because the Ohio Real Estate Appraiser Board regulates appraisers under a separate chapter, with its own membership and standards tied to the Federal Appraisal Subcommittee. It is entirely distinct from the Commission's authority over brokers and salespersons. A is wrong because the Commission governs real estate brokers and salespersons. Appraiser regulation was deliberately placed in a separate board to satisfy federal requirements, so the two should not be confused. B is wrong because the division administers broker and salesperson licensing. Appraiser oversight belongs to the separate appraiser board, which answers to federal appraisal standards rather than to the division. D is wrong because the Department of Commerce is only the umbrella cabinet department. The specific job of regulating appraisers falls to the dedicated appraiser board, not the department as a whole. Appraiser regulation in Ohio is deliberately kept separate from the licensing structure that governs brokers and salespersons. The Ohio Real Estate Appraiser Board operates under its own chapter of law, with its own membership and its own standards. After the savings and loan crisis exposed problems with unreliable appraisals, federal law required states to regulate appraisers under federally approved standards. Ohio responded by creating a dedicated appraiser board built specifically around that federal framework, something brokerage licensing rules were never designed to address. It is critical to distinguish these four bodies. The appraiser board handles appraiser licensing and discipline. The Real Estate Commission governs brokers and salespersons. The Division of Real Estate administers broker licensing day to day. The Department of Commerce is simply the cabinet umbrella. It does not specifically regulate appraisers. The appraiser board operates alongside, but completely independent of, the bodies that handle brokers and salespersons. An appraiser's credentials, conduct rules, and discipline all live under the board's authority, tied directly to the federal appraisal framework. When an exam question asks which Ohio body regulates appraisers under separate membership and federally tied standards, the answer is always the Ohio Real Estate Appraiser Board. Not the Commission, not the Division, and not the Department of Commerce. Question 45. A sale collapses and the buyer and seller both claim the earnest money. Which of the following best describes how the broker must handle the disputed funds? Your options are A. Release them to the buyer immediately. B. Hold them until release, court, or agreement. C. Pay them to the seller on demand. D. Transfer them to the brokerage account. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is B. Hold them until release, court, or agreement. B is correct because the broker must keep disputed earnest money in the trust account until the parties sign a written release, a court order's disposition, or another mechanism in the purchase agreement is triggered. The broker may not act on one party's demand. A is wrong because releasing the funds to the buyer on one side say-so risks paying the wrong party. The broker must wait for written agreement, a court order, or a contractual mechanism. C is wrong because paying the seller on demand has the same flaw as favoring the buyer. Acting on a unilateral demand can constitute a trust account violation or conversion to the wrong party. D is wrong because moving disputed escrow into the brokerage's own account is conversion. The funds stay in trust until a proper release, court order, or agreement directs their disbursement. When a real estate sale collapses and both parties claim the earnest money, the broker holding it faces strict legal obligations. Understanding those rules means knowing exactly what can and cannot trigger a release of those funds. There are exactly 3 legitimate ways disputed earnest money may be disbursed: a written release signed by both parties, a court order resolving the dispute, or a mechanism the purchase agreement itself provides. Until one of these is triggered, the broker holds the funds and acts on no one's unilateral say-so. The broker is a neutral custodian, not a judge. A failed deal creates a genuine legal dispute about who breached and who is owed the deposit, and resolving that belongs to the parties or a court. The broker's only role is to keep the money safely in trust until proper authority directs its movement. Any unilateral release is improper. Paying the buyer or seller on demand risks handing funds to the wrong party. Most dangerously, transferring the disputed escrow into the brokerage's own account is conversion, moving client trust money into the firm's funds. The deposit stays in trust, intact and untouched until a proper trigger applies. Remember, no release without a written agreement, a court order, or a contractual mechanism. Anything less is a breach of duty, elitsat, and moving the money into the brokerage account is conversion. Hold until proper authority and nothing less. Question 46. Under Ohio law, which of the following may a licensee properly do with a standard? Attorney-prepared purchase agreement. Your options are: A. Draft a custom indemnification clause. B. Opine on the legal effects of title. C. Charge a separate legal fee. D. Fill in the transaction's factual blanks. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is D. Fill in the transaction's factual blanks. D is correct because a licensee may complete attorney-prepared standard forms by filling in the transaction's factual blanks, such as price, dates, and the property address. Exercising legal judgment to craft new terms crosses into the practice of law. A is wrong because drafting a custom indemnification clause is creating a legal provision. That is the unauthorized practice of law which the fill blanks rule expressly forbids. B is wrong because opining on the legal effect of title is giving legal advice. A licensee must refer such questions to an attorney rather than render a legal opinion. C is wrong because charging a separate legal fee signals that the licensee is offering legal services. Licensees may not bill for legal work which is reserved to attorneys, so a separate legal charge is improper. In Ohio, real estate licensees and attorneys play distinct roles when it comes to legal documents. Understanding exactly where a licensee's authority ends is essential for protecting consumers and staying within the law. A licensee may complete an attorney-prepared standard form by entering only the transaction's factual details, the purchase price, the closing date, and the names of the parties along with the property address. These are facts the parties have already agreed upon, requiring no legal judgment. Crossing into legal territory is where licensees must stop. Drafting custom clauses, opining on the legal effects of title, charging a separate legal fee, and interpreting legal rights are all reserved exclusively for attorneys. Any of these acts constitutes unauthorized practice of law. The mechanism is simple. The form is drafted by a lawyer, and the licensee merely populates its factual blanks with the deal's specifics. Anything requiring legal judgment, new provisions, rights analysis, legal opinions, must be referred to an attorney. Remember, filling in facts is a licensee's job. Crafting legal terms is not. When in doubt, refer it to an attorney and stay safely on the factual side of the line. Question 47. Which of the following is the primary legal effect of recording a deed in the county recorder's office? Your options are: A. It transfers title to the grantee. B. It gives constructive notice to the world. C. It pays off the seller's mortgage. D. It satisfies the conveyance fee. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is B. It gives constructive notice to the world. B is correct because recording gives constructive notice to the world of the buyer's interest, protecting priority against later purchasers and creditors. Title itself already passed on delivery and acceptance, not on recording. A is wrong because recording does not transfer title. Delivery and acceptance accomplish that. Recording protects the buyer's priority in the records, but is not the act that moves ownership to the grantee. C is wrong because recording a deed does not pay off any mortgage. A seller's existing loan is satisfied from sale proceeds and released by a separate recorded satisfaction, not by recording the deed. D is wrong because the conveyance fee is a transfer charge paid to the county auditor. Recording places the document in the public record for notice. It does not by itself satisfy that fee. When a buyer records a deed at the county recorder's office, the primary legal effect is giving constructive notice to the world. This is distinct from what actually transfers ownership in the first place. Title itself passes from seller to buyer upon delivery and acceptance of the deed, not upon recording. Recording is the separate step that protects that ownership by putting the world on notice of the interest already conveyed. Constructive notice means the law presumes everyone has seen the public record, whether or not they actually checked. Once a deed is recorded, no subsequent buyer can claim to be an innocent purchaser without notice. The recording system creates a searchable public record at the county recorder's office. That record blocks any later claimant from arguing they had no notice of the prior ownership interest. Recording does not transfer title, pay off any existing mortgage, or satisfy the conveyance fee owed to the county auditor. It does one thing: it protects the owner's priority by giving public notice of an interest that delivery and acceptance already created. Question 48. A sudden flood violently shifts a river's course and moves soil overnight. Which of the following terms describes this abrupt change, which generally does not alter legal boundaries? Your options are accretion, B. Erosion, C. Reliction, D. Avulsion. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is D. Avulsion. D is correct because avulsion is the sudden loss or addition of land by a violent natural force such as a flood. Because the change is abrupt rather than gradual, boundaries usually remain where they were before. A is wrong because accretion is the slow, gradual buildup of land from waterborne soil. The question stresses a sudden overnight event, which is the opposite of the gradual process accretion describes. B is wrong because erosion is the gradual wearing away of land over time by water or wind. It removes land slowly, so it cannot describe a violent flood that rearranges soil in a single night. C is wrong because reliction is land exposed when water gradually recedes. It involves a slow retreat of water uncovering soil, not the abrupt, forceful shift of a river that avulsion captures. When a sudden, violent natural event like a flood reshapes a riverbank overnight, the law doesn't automatically redraw property lines. This principle is called avulsion, and understanding it requires knowing what makes it different from other water-related boundary rules. Avulsion is one of 4 water boundary doctrines examiners test together. Accretion, erosion, and reliction are all gradual processes that do shift property lines over time. Avulsion is the exception. because it is sudden and violent. The law freezes the boundary where it was before the event. Imagine a parcel whose boundary runs with a riverbank. A violent flood carves a new channel overnight. The river has moved, but the legal boundary has not. It remains fixed at the pre-flood channel, regardless of where the water now flows. The law's reasoning comes down to three ideas. The change is sudden and violent, not gradual. Instantly redrawing ownership from a single flood would be deeply unfair. And so the legal response is to freeze the boundary in place, protecting the lines that existed before the catastrophe. Whenever a fact pattern describes an overnight or abrupt natural event that relocates a river or moves soil dramatically, that signals avulsion. Unlike gradual processes, avulsion leaves legal boundaries exactly where they were before the event occurred. Question 49. Even when buying or selling their own property as a principal, a licensee under Ohio law still owes the other party which of the following? Your options are A. Full fiduciary loyalty, B. Confidentiality of the other party's plans, C. Honesty and disclosure of known material facts, D. Advocacy and negotiations. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C. Honesty and disclosure of known material facts. C is correct because a licensee acting as a principal still owes honesty and disclosure of known material facts, because the material fact duty applies to all licensees. What they do not owe as a non-agent are fiduciary duties. A is wrong because fiduciary loyalty arises only from representing a client. A licensee acting as a principal represents only themselves in the deal, so they owe the other side honesty and material fact disclosure, not loyalty. B is wrong because confidentiality protects a client's bargaining position. The other party is not the licensee's client, so the licensee owes them no duty to guard their plans. D is wrong because advocacy is owed to a represented client. A licensee buying or selling for their own account advances their own interest, not the other party's. When a real estate licensee buys or sells property for their own account, they step into the role of a principal, not an agent. But Ohio law doesn't let the license go silent. Two distinct categories of duty apply very differently in this situation. Universal duties, honesty and disclosure of known material facts, bind every licensee in every dealing, whether acting as agent or principal. Relationship-based duties, loyalty, confidentiality, and advocacy arise only from representing a client, so they have no one to attach to when the licensee is the party to the deal. Think of it as two layers. The universal layer, honesty and material fact disclosure, covers the licensee no matter what role they occupy. The fiduciary layer only activates when there is a client relationship. Remove the client and the fiduciary layer simply doesn't engage. A licensee selling their own property owes the buyer no loyalty, need not protect the buyer's plans or negotiating position, and has no obligation to advocate for the buyer's interests, because the buyer is not their client. These three duties flow from representation, and there is none here. The key takeaway for the exam: honesty and material fact disclosure survive the principal role because they protect the public broadly. Fiduciary duties do not survive because they require a client to serve. Sort the duties into universal and relationship-based, and the answer becomes clear. Question 50. Which of the following principles holds that a buyer will pay no more for a property than the cost of acquiring an equally desirable substitute? Your options are A. Substitution, B. Anticipation, C. Regression, D. Plottage. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A. Substitution. A is correct because the principle of substitution states that a buyer will pay no more than the cost of an equally desirable alternative. It is the foundation underlying all three approaches to value, especially sales comparison. B is wrong because anticipation holds that value reflects the expectation of future benefits. It drives the income approach by looking forward to income or amenities, not at the cost of a comparable substitute. C is wrong because regression holds that a better property loses value when surrounded by lesser ones. It addresses the drag of inferior neighbors, not a buyer's choice among equally desirable substitutes. D is wrong because plottage is the added value created when adjacent parcels are combined under one owner. It concerns assembling land, not the ceiling a substitute sets on what a buyer will pay. The principle of substitution is one of the most foundational ideas in real estate appraisal. It holds that a rational buyer will never pay more for a property than the cost of acquiring an equally desirable substitute in the open market. Think of it like shopping. If two products offer the same value, a rational buyer chooses the cheaper one. Competing alternatives create a natural ceiling on price, and no seller can exceed that ceiling without losing buyers to the substitute. In practice, appraisers apply substitution through the sales comparison approach, studying recent sales of similar properties and adjusting for differences to estimate what a buyer would reasonably pay for the subject property. Examiners often test substitution alongside three neighboring principles. Anticipation looks forward to expected benefits. Regression addresses how inferior surrounding properties drag down value. Plottage is the gain from assembling adjacent parcels. None of these set a ceiling based on comparable alternatives. Only substitution does. Whenever a question describes a buyer refusing to overpay because an equivalent property is available for less, that is substitution. The principle that competitive alternatives discipline what any single property can command.
You have reached the end of our first question set. For the free complete exam preparation, visit our website, link in the description, where you find thousands more practice questions and comprehensive study guides. Thanks for studying with us today. See you in the next video.